Mrs. Speaker, I am Sandra Shortley. Once again, I'm happy to be with you. I think the film we're about to see is called 9/11 Truth. It features interviews with architects, engineers, scientists, scholars, other professionals, and people who were at the scene.
Tribute lights in the New York skyline, an annual memorial to the lives lost on 9/11. Yet there's still more light that needs to shine, revealing truths that their family members deserve to know. September 11th, 2001, a day that changed history. 4 planes went silent and off course. 2 of those planes crashed into the World Trade Center Twin Towers. Several columns were severed, and the jet fuel ignited fires that spread over several floors. About an hour later, millions watched in shock as both towers were suddenly and rapidly destroyed, killing almost 3,000 people, for whom truth and justice may have yet to be served. Hi, I'm Richard Gage, AIA, licensed architect of over 20 years and member of the American Institute of Architects. I'm founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, a nonprofit organization of well over 1,000 technical and building professionals. According to official government reports, the fires weakened the structural steel framing of both twin towers, leading to sudden, progressive, and total collapses. Unknown to most people, a third steel frame high-rise, World Trade Center 7, was also destroyed. Critical questions have been raised by more than 1,500 architects and engineers about the official explanations for the destruction of all 3 of these buildings. Along with more than 10,000 other concerned individuals, these professionals, collectively comprising more than 25,000 years of experience, have signed our petition. They're calling for a new investigation into the destruction of these 3 World Trade Center high-rises. This call is based on evidence that reveals a very different destruction scenario than reported by government engineers. This includes abundant scientific forensic data and eyewitness testimony that was omitted from the official reports. You'll be seeing this evidence and hearing from dozens of these technical experts, including many who are among the top in their respective fields. We at AE 9/11 Truth are inspired by President Obama's affirmation to the American people in his inaugural address. How do we accomplish this? We've done our best to fulfill the President's vision by using the scientific method, examining the evidence from the World Trade Center and developing unbiased conclusions from unbiased experts in their fields. Listen to the President provide his account of the pervasive political abuse of science.
And we have watched as scientific integrity has been undermined and scientific research politicized in an effort to advance predetermined ideological agendas.
As coherent sets of scientific facts are brought into focus by the experts, the data, and the witnesses in this film, you'll come to a much greater understanding of the events of 9/11 and will be in a position to draw your own informed conclusions. Also, psychologists, therapists, and counselors, along with theologian David Ray Griffin, who have a deep understanding of the personal issues associated with 9/11, will explain why it is so difficult for us to come to terms with the reality of these events, and learn how we can help ourselves and others with this difficult yet vital responsibility. Of course, the ones still most affected by the events of that tragic day are the family members of the victims lost on 9/11. Several have asked to appear in this documentary. Although our focus will be primarily technical, we are deeply moved and honored to give them the opportunity to speak directly to you. Now, let's hear from the AE 9/11 Truth professional petition signers who will share with you what conclusions they came to. Among these experts are high-rise architects and engineers in the fields of structural design, materials science, chemistry, fire protection, metallurgy, as well as physicists, explosives experts, and demolition technicians. Joining them will be firefighters and 9/11 victims' family members who support our call for a new World Trade Center investigation.
I don't want to be involved in conspiracy theories. There are lots of them. They can go on. We can speculate on that forever. What we really need to know is how those buildings came down.
My name is Joel Miller, and I have a Bachelor of Architecture degree from Temple University in Philadelphia. And while I was there in Philadelphia, I worked for 2 firms on a couple of high-rise buildings. The 13-story Federal Detention Center for Ewing Cole, Cherry, and Brott. I spent about 2 years on that project, and then a year on a high-rise dormitory, about 15 stories for MGA Partners. If we are to believe that fire brought down 3 buildings on the same day on 9/11, that's very troubling for all of us in the design professions. Architects, engineers, even physicists. I'm incredulous that this could have happened and very troubled by the implications of this possibility. There are thousands of high-rise buildings in the United States and more being built every day in this country and abroad. As architects and engineers, we have a responsibility to protect people that are users of buildings.
The new World Trade Center Building 7 looms above the site of its original. Building 7 was a 47-story high-rise, not hit by an airplane. Yet it was the 3rd modern steel-frame skyscraper to collapse rapidly and symmetrically on 9/11. It was a football field away from the North Tower and sustained minor damage from the falling debris. Building 7's precipitous collapse was blamed on normal office fires.
I'm Kamal Obeid. I have a master's degree in civil and structural engineering from the University of California at Berkeley. I've been a practicing engineer for the last 30 years. Building 7 to me is really what gives it away, because that's a classic case of controlled demolition.
My name is Stephen Dustwald. I'm a licensed professional structural engineer with 37 years of experience in the structural field. I have 25 years of experience as owner and principal of my own structural engineering firm here in Las Vegas. I have focused on nuclear power plant design, large commercial and industrial buildings. I first became aware of the problems with the official account of the collapse when I saw a DVD online from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. They pointed out various problems with the official story, and the ones that caught my attention were the rapid failure of the connections in order for the building to come down at the rate that it did.
My name is Casey Pfeiffer. I am a registered professional structural engineer in San Diego, California. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering at the University of Notre Dame. I have been practicing engineering for 15 years, and currently I am the principal of Pacific Coast Structural Engineering in San Diego, California. A friend of mine gave me a blueprint for 9/11 Truth DVD to review, and from that, the evidence that I saw was so compelling that it became obvious that the official story was not correct.
I'm William Rice. I worked for one of the nation's largest design build construction firms on commercial and industrial and institutional projects in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore areas. As a professor, taught engineering materials, structures lab, and other building-related courses at Vermont Technical College to architectural and engineering students for 20 years. I watched Building 7 fall at an accelerating rate in 6.5 seconds. This was a massive 47-story structure. The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives. In other words, controlled demolition.
My name is David Topete. I have a Master's of Science degree in Civil Engineering. I am a licensed structural engineer. I design new structures and retrofit existing structures from concrete or masonry or structural steel. In my professional opinion, in my experience, for World Trade Center 7 to collapse straight down upon itself, as video indicates, as everything that we've witnessed, the supports at the center essentially all had to be taken out at once. I certainly believe that it had to have been controlled demolition, controlled charges, explosives, something of that type, because it was a sudden failure.
I'm Dr. Bob Bowman, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, retired. Flew 101 combat missions in Vietnam, directed all the Star Wars programs under Presidents Ford and Carter. My PhD is in aeronautics and nuclear engineering from Caltech. I did postdoctoral work at the von Karman Institute in Brussels, Belgium, in finite element analysis. I taught at 5 universities and colleges, serving as department head and assistant dean. The coup de grace for me was when I found out that Building 7 had collapsed later that day, and when I saw Building 7 come down. To me, Building 7, the fact that it looks like a perfect controlled demolition of an intact building with no visible fires. I mean, that's what I call a smoking gun.
My name is Robert McCoy. I'm an architect. I have a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of California in Berkeley in 1963. Been licensed in California since about 1964. From about 1965 until about 1985, most of my experience has been in high-rise, multi-story steel buildings. NIST would have us to believe that these was a typical office fire, scattered office fires, if you will, that brought this building down. Since the mid-60s, I've tried to follow high-rise fires because they're something we worry a lot about as we design these buildings. And I'm not aware of any high-rise building that have come down as a result of fires. I can't remember even a partial collapse in any of these buildings that I've watched over the years.
I'm Steve Barish, founder and president of Barish Architects and Associates, Inc., a 33-year-old architecture, planning, and engineering firm. We have offices in San Luis Obispo and Pasadena, California. I hold a Bachelor of Architecture degree from the University of Arizona and a Master's of Architecture and Urban Design from Rice University in Houston, Texas. Spent 3 years in London as the first PhD student at the Architectural Association. One of the things that really interested me is how quickly the Tower 7 fell. It fell within 7 seconds approximately from top to bottom. This building was built in the mid-'80s apparently and met all the known codes at the time. Buildings just don't behave like that.
We're here in Sydney with Jan Utzon, son of the great Jorn Utzon, who designed the Sydney Opera House. What are the features of the collapse of World Trade Center 7 that caused you to be disturbed?
It looked like it was a demolition more than anything else.
My name is Les Young. I'm a licensed architect in both New York State and in California. I've been involved in many large projects, including overseeing several high-rise buildings ranging in size from 14 stories to 40. Over the course of 20 years, I'm mainly called in to help with very large, difficult projects. When I watched Building 7 collapse, it basically left no doubt in my mind that something was wrong. Building 7 had not been hit by a plane. To me, it was obvious that there was some controlled demolition and some explosions involved.
Was the structural steel from World Trade Center 7 preserved, documented, analyzed according to standard procedures for investigating engineering failures?
It was really clear from the beginning that there was this great move to, as quickly as possible, get rid of all of the rubble and move it off.
Because what they did immediately after 9/11 was they started removing the steel, the debris from Tower 7 and all the towers immediately. They sent it off to China to be recycled.
400 truckloads per day of material were taken away from the World Trade Center site and sent to China for recycling.
All of a sudden they had a big incentive to recycle steel for some reason.
Quickly and rapidly, they were destroying the structural steel.
The steel was hauled away and melted down before it could be analyzed.
It was already being carted away and destroyed when the FEMA investigators got there about a month after September 11th.
It was being melted down, it was being cut up into pieces so that no real thorough investigation could happen. And that in itself is a crime, and that kind of thing needs to be investigated.
The steel was picked up and carted away before anybody got a good look at it. And the destruction of evidence was a criminal act in itself. It would have answered a lot of questions that we can't answer because we don't have the structural steel to examine.
There were laws violated in the destruction of that evidence. And for the American Society of Civil Engineers to ignore those events is extremely disturbing and is a violation, in my opinion, of their professional code of ethics.
It was contrary to the way all investigations are done. If an airplane crashes, they seal off the entire area, nobody touches anything, they move it to a secure location, and they reconstruct an aircraft.
Normally, when you have a structural failure, you carefully go through the debris field, looking at each item, photographing every beam as it collapsed and every column where it is in the ground, and you pick them up very carefully and you look at each element. We were unable to do that in the case of Tower 7.
Aside from this one small piece that was found to have intergranular melting, incredibly, none of the other steel from World Trade Center 7 was saved for analysis. This is disconcerting, considering World Trade Center 7 would have been the first steel-framed high-rise building in history to ostensibly collapse due to fire.
The government has destroyed much of the evidence, but there's still some evidence available in photographs of the evidence.
My name is Lynn Margulis. I've been doing science every day since I was about 16 years old. I teach at the University of Massachusetts. I have a PhD in genetics. I reconstruct the past, natural history, from clues taken to be representational, and that's exactly what we're doing with reconstructing of why the buildings were destroyed in 9/11. In historical science, that's what must be done. In 1999, I was a recipient of the President's Medal of Science from Clinton, and I received the Da Vinci Award, that is the membership in the Da Vinci Society. You can't do science when you are deprived of the evidence and when your hypothesis is the least valid instead of the most likely. When the most likely hypothesis in the case of Building 7 wasn't even mentioned. This is not science. So the claim is that it's something else. It's trying to prove preconceived ideas.
Was a proper investigation performed that might have revealed the use of accelerants or explosives in World Trade Center 7's destruction?
My name is Stephen Jones, a physicist. I received my PhD in physics from Vanderbilt University in 1978, so I've been at this for over 30 years, studying various subjects. I have published over 50 peer-reviewed papers in my career. NIST concedes that they found no evidence for explosives. So then we asked them, well, did you look? And they said, no, we did not look for explosives or residues of explosives.
I'm Ron Brookman, licensed structural engineer in California, and I received my master's degree in structural engineering from University of California at Davis in 1986. I've been practicing structural engineering ever since then. NIST never did a proper evaluation of the collapse site and the debris. World Trade Center 7, I would have expected they would have tested for explosives also, because of the nature of the collapse and the unprecedented nature of a steel-framed high-rise building collapsing in such a fashion.
My name is Roland Angle. I'm a civil engineer registered in the state of California. I've been practicing in California since 1967. I'm a graduate of the University of California. And my practice has included, among other things, design and testing of structures that were designed to withstand blasts. Specifically, for instance, the launch facilities for the Minuteman missile system. I was a Green Beret for 6 years during the 60s. I was trained in the use of demolitions, and I blew a lot of things up. One of the things that we did was go out and attack structures, analyze them as to where their weak points were, learn how to place explosives at points that would cause them to fail, and then actually demolish them and analyze our results. So the method of how to attack a structure and cause it to fail with explosives was one of the things that I learned through my military training. Well, the American Society of Civil Engineers was brought into this investigation early on. They did a very superficial investigation of the site. They issued a report without any significant forensic examination, and there were laws violated in the destruction of that evidence. And for the American Society of Civil Engineers to ignore those events is extremely disturbing, and is a violation, in my opinion, of their professional code of ethics.
The country owns this. We were all victims. You all should want answers. It's not just ours, not just mine. We all lost something that day.